What's up everybody, it's Man of Low Moral Fiber here. My name's Luke, and in this video we're going to be taking another look at the Slowhand as a part of my Does It Suck series. The Slowhand is a unique Moxxi Etech shotgun made by Hyperion in the second campaign DLC, Mr. Torgue's campaign of Carnage. I believe this weapon is available as a rare drop from both Piston and Badassosaurus Rex. Like a lot of other weapons, it did receive a significant buff as a part of the community patch, which is why we're going to be taking another look at it. We're going to start here without the community patch applied and then move on to applying the community patch to see how the weapon has improved. Now, even without the community patch applied, this weapon has the potential to be very powerful, assuming you have the right accessory, and that accessory is going to be the foregrip accessory that we have here. On a Hyperion shotgun, the foregrip accessory is going to give it a practicable prefix. If we compare this particular variant of the weapon to one with a different accessory, we can see that the practicable version is basically going to be 3 times as powerful, because that foregrip accessory adds 2 extra pellets, and this is a weapon that ordinarily only has a single pellet. So when we switch to the practicable version, it will have 3 pellets, and they actually come out relatively close together, and so it's quite easy to land all 3 of these on a target. Now, let's go ahead and try to capture, if we can, all 3 pellets being fired here. You can also see that it is consuming 2 ammo per shot. It's a little bit difficult to see, I guess, when I'm trying to pause it here because the pellets are so close together, but on the card it says 3, and I promise there are 3 coming out of it. We'll be able to see that on the Sanctuary testing dummy pretty soon here. Let's go ahead and take a look at how the weapon performs real quick. Now, it is a Moxxi weapon. It doesn't have quite the healing that, say, a Grog Nozzle or even a Ruby would have, but at overpower level 8, you're dealing so much damage that with this weapon you should be fairly effectively able to health gate. We'll go ahead and shoot at this guy here. There was a slag barrel next to him, so he pretty easily got slagged there because the splash radius on these pellets is quite large. You can see that on a slagged enemy, it really kind of ate that guy up quite quickly. Let's go ahead and get down here. We'll throw our turret up here, and then we'll slag these enemies if we can, and see how this weapon does. Now, it's pretty easy to deal damage to multiple enemies at once with this weapon, assuming they're grouped up relatively concisely, because it does have that pretty large splash radius. Now, this weapon cannot get critical hits, and so it's not going to be super good at taking out exploders, for example, but there are other weapons you can use for that. Now, even as a shotgun, it looks like it can be used relatively easily at range, and that's kind of cool. Let's go ahead and finish off the rest of this room here. We'll go take a look at the badass in a minute, and then we'll see what we can do there. Now, when you do have some skills that are increasing your fire rate, you will notice that you eat through the magazine pretty quickly on this weapon. It's consuming 2 ammo per shot. You have a magazine size of 10 with this particular configuration, and that is the Hyperion grip with the practicable accessory. And so with that in mind, you do have to keep a slight eye out on your ammo. Shotguns don't have an especially deep ammo purse, only allowing you to carry 220 when you have all of the SDUs. And this weapon consumes 2 ammo per shot, so it does eat through that pretty quickly. Let's go ahead and see what we can do against the badass loader up here. And when you're using the shotgun ammo, you should be able to get quite a bit of it back from these chests and stuff. The shotgun ammo pickups give you quite a bit of ammo, so I don't think you would run out of ammo using this weapon, so long as you actually pay attention to the ammo chest as you go along. You can see there that I'm already back up to 192 shotgun ammo, so we shouldn't have too big of a problem with the Slowhand, even without the community patch applied. I'll go ahead and try to take some damage here so we can look at the healing that this weapon is doing. So there we go. We took some damage, and then we easily got back above health gate. It looked like in 2 shotgun shots there. So pretty effective healing weapon there. Let's go ahead and travel to Sanctuary and see what this weapon can do against the testing dummy. Now, this weapon is not very good if you have the wrong accessory, at least without the community patch applied. I believe that the community patch is going to change that a little bit, but I haven't tested it quite yet. The newest version of the community patch should make this weapon very good on Axton, not necessarily because of a direct buff that the Slowhand got, but because of the global change to Etech shotguns, and we'll go over that here in just a second. We're going down to the testing dummy, so I will go ahead and throw on a fire version. We could just simply use the corrosive version and compare the relative damage, but since I already have a fire version here in my inventory, we might as well throw it on, and I'll even throw on the Firebone of the Ancients as well. So let's head down here and see how much damage we're getting. should be easier to see that there are 3 pellets on this version now. So we can see that there is a 1371 3 different times there. And so that's basically 4 million a shot here with the legendary soldier comm. If you add all that up, there's a little bit of rounding there. I guess we could say 4.1 million if we're rounding up a little bit. Now, if we switch to a legendary grenadier comm, well, that's not available yet, so we'll just switch to an expert grenadier comm. And we should notice that this weapon does not benefit from the grenade damage boost. So 921k there per pellet. And then if we take off the expert grenadier comm, I would imagine that we have about the same damage, still 921k. So currently the weapon is not benefiting from the grenade damage at all. So let's go ahead and see what happens after we apply the community patch. Currently the weapon has a fire rate of 2.1 and it's got about 701,000 damage here. So let's see how it does after we apply the community patch. And again, looking at it, it's doing about 4 million a shot here, plus the damage over time. So we'll quit out here, we'll apply the community patch, we'll come back in and see what happens. The patch notes for Etech shotguns say that they've removed the critical hit prefix for them, so you shouldn't be able to farm anymore with the critical hit prefix, which is definitely a benefit because the critical hit prefix is worthless on a weapon that cannot score critical hits. Now, if we take a look at the weapon, instead of 701k, we'll see that it's at 1.28 million here. So significant buff there, but it's no longer times 3. In addition, the patch notes also say that the Etech shotguns are dealing roughly 3 times of their previous damage. I don't think that's necessarily the case on the Slowhand. I think that's mainly for the non-uniques. But in addition to that, it should only consume 1 ammo per shot now. The projectile speed should be a lot faster. They should have an increased explosion radius, and they're actually going to benefit from grenade damage. So let's test a couple of those things out now. You can see that it fires a much faster moving projectile, so that should make it easier to contact certain enemies. It is only consuming 1 ammo per shot, and I'd imagine that the splash radius on it is going to be quite large. Maybe not that large, but that large. So that's pretty large there. And also, I don't think you can damage yourself with this weapon anymore, whereas before, with the without the community patch at least, you could potentially kill yourself with this weapon, which I didn't demonstrate and I should have. So now when we fire the weapon, it's dealing 3.7 million damage there. And it's also got a much higher fire rate than it had before, now at 4.3. The other versions of it still have a higher fire rate than they had beforehand as well. Let's go ahead and see what this weapon does when we switch from a legendary soldier comm to a legendary grenadier comm. So right now it's dealing about 3.76 million damage, and if we switch over to a different class mod here, like the legendary grenadier, we should see that it goes up quite a bit in damage to almost 5 million there. So that's even more than it was doing prior with the 3 pellets. So that's pretty impressive there. Almost 5 million damage. And then in addition to that, the other versions of the weapon, say if they have a different prefix, for example, are now going to be much better than they were before. So prior to the community patch, there was really only one version of the Slowhand that you could actually use. Now there are multiple versions. I still think the practicable version is probably going to be the best because it has what seems to be the craziest fire rate. And it is quite an impressive fire rate here, and that really works out nice with its effective, much deeper magazine. That is pretty impressive there. So let's go ahead, head back to the Washburne Refinery, and we'll see what happens. I would expect that this weapon is really going to eat up most of these enemies now. We are benefiting from steady, which is going to give us significant grenade damage, and when we have our turret out, we're going to get a bunch of grenade damage from that as well. Plus, we get a bigger damage boost from our expert grenadier comm, so we should see significant improvement on this weapon. In addition to that, the ammo efficiency on this weapon is going to be much higher, and we shouldn't really need to worry too much about our ammo consumption. We'll see, though. That's why we're heading to the Washburne Refinery to test. I'm almost thinking that this weapon might be OP now, at least on Axton. And that's pretty cool. Now, even before the community patch, this weapon was somewhat effective even on a character like Zero who, usually needs critical hits. And so now that this weapon got a significant buff, it may just be, you know, over the line. I'm not entirely sure. So let's go ahead and pick on this guy a little bit. There's no slag this time for him, but yeah, you can see that so long as we're actually hitting him, that's very, very powerful. That increased projectile speed makes it a lot easier to hit enemies with. Obviously, you're probably used to leading with this weapon a little bit if you had used it previously, and so now you won't have to lead them as much. Let's go ahead and get our turret out here, get some slag on some of these enemies if we can, and then we'll lay into them here. Oh my gosh, this thing is brutal. Now keep in mind, this thing also is going to have healing, and so that's something that you know, is definitely an invaluable trait. It's something that is very, very valuable in a weapon. Now, I'm not exactly sure how large the splash radius is here. We can test that on a couple of these enemies. If we shoot over here on this guy, if we shoot, so not quite that wide, but if we shoot up here, I think that killed him. That's pretty wild. So it has a very large splash radius, like a very large splash radius. We'll try to get these guys slagged, and then we'll kill this guy, and we got our health back. So that's good stuff. That's one of the benefits of the healing there. You can charge an enemy who's ordinarily going to explode on you and kill him with your Moxxi weapon and not have to worry about it too much. That's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and see what it can do against a badass loader here. I'll go ahead and open a couple of these boxes as we wait for our action skill to cool down a little bit. We shouldn't really have to worry too much about ammo consumption now that it only consumes 1 ammo per shot, but I guess it does fire really quickly now, so it might be a little bit easy to let the ammo consumption run away from you if you're missing your shots. So 1 magazine there was enough to take out a super badass loader. I'm thinking that this weapon might be a little bit OP on Axton, to be honest with you. Now, on other characters, it's not going to be quite as powerful because they can't boost grenade damage quite as much as Axton can. But I'd imagine that Krieg with this weapon, with the community patch, is going to be a little bit absurd as well. We'll go ahead and continue with this weapon. It's very, safe to say that this weapon doesn't suck now. This weapon is boss. I mean, and I still think the practicable version is going to be the best version because of its ridiculous fire rate, but even without that, the weapon should be, powerful enough to kill with any accessory now, I would imagine. I mean, there are some accessories that aren't going to be very good. For example, if you have a critical hit accessory, which you can still get prior to the community patch, if you had it available, the community patch doesn't delete it. You shouldn't be able to farm it anymore, I believe, but that's still going to be a bad accessory. But even with that accessory, I'd imagine that it's still very good. I don't know if it can spawn without an accessory, but that's pretty much what would happen if you had the critical hit damage version of it. Now, this weapon should be good against power loaders because I don't think they can reflect it because it's strictly a splash-based projectile. You can see with Metal Storm there, it really has a crazy fire rate. I like that. That's kind of cool. Let's try to get this guy slagged and see if we can stop him from getting all the way to us. So even though it can't disable an exploder, it can still murk an exploder like relatively easily. So that guy has taken down my shield. Let's try to, reload and get our shots off, but we weren't able to reload in time. So because you fire, relatively quickly with this weapon, you'll still reload it quite a bit, and that's maybe something that you don't want in your healing weapon because it won't always be available. But with that in mind, keep an eye out on your magazine size, try not to catch a shock damage over time, and you should be able to be fairly survivable with this weapon. Let's go ahead and get our turret out there so that we can get our Battlefront bonus, and then we'll lay into this guy again. With the Battlefront bonus, a single magazine or 10 shots from this weapon is going to absolutely decimate him. And you can see how quickly we can get those 10 shots out. This weapon is massive on Axton. It's going to absolutely wreck things. I do have a shock version, so we shouldn't even have any problems with Hurley. We'll see. Go ahead and kill this guy here, and then I'll throw my turret. Now we have Battlefront and our kill skills. We should wreck this guy pretty good. Hopefully the turret has slagged the next enemy for us. Perfect. We'll continue to move through here. Turret should slag that here in just a moment, and then we'll finish him off as well. That's good stuff. We'll go ahead and continue to slag these enemies here. Excellent. This weapon is, I mean, I think it's probably one of Axton's best options with the newest version of the community patch. The older versions of the community patch don't have these same Etech buffs applied for shotguns, but the newest version, version 4.1, has made Etech shotguns another tool for Axton to use. And that's pretty good because, you know, Etech shotguns were, for the most part, worthless beforehand. Now, the Slowhand had always been kind of good with the practicable prefix, but now it's really good. Like, really, really good. And I will say that the increased projectile speed makes aiming the weapon a little bit more conventional. So even if you haven't used the weapon before, you won't really need to learn too much. It's basically a point and destroy weapon. And, you know, that's pretty easy to see at this point, I think. I mean, this weapon is destroying these enemies and, you know, in short order. Plus, it's got other benefits too, like having a large splash radius and providing healing. This weapon is a monster. It's destroying these enemies. And so that's pretty cool there. And then in addition to that, you can't even hurt yourself with it anymore. That's going to be quite outrageous. I mean, this weapon is top tier on Axton now. It's something that was a good weapon beforehand and now is an incredible weapon. And that's pretty cool. Now on other characters, it's not going to be quite as powerful as it is on Axton because obviously they're not getting the grenade damage buffs that he is absolutely wrecking with here. See, like, almost one shot killed Pervy there. That is... that's quite the weapon. I like this weapon quite a bit. I'm worried that this one might be a little bit overtuned on Axton, to be honest with you, but I'm not too worried about it. Axton's not the most powerful character to begin with, but this is now one of Axton's best mobbing options. And in addition to that, you gain the benefit of being able to use a Bone of the Ancients comm instead of having to use, say, an explosive relic or another relic that is not going to give you elemental damage and cooldown rate, because Axton's turret has a relatively long cooldown. And so when you have the Bone of the Ancients providing a significant cooldown rate improvement there, that's really nice. And then in addition to that, you're boosting the corrosive damage, or, you know, if you wanted to use shock or fire, you could do that as well. So definitely a huge boost to be able to use the Bone of the Ancients effectively with Axton here, instead of having to use, say, an explosive relic. Now this guy's firing at me here. I don't know who will win, my shield or his health bar, but if he gets my shield down, you can see that we can easily stay above health gate so long as we don't have to reload there. So that's really impressive. Now this is an area where I was going to say our increased projectile speed should really come in handy while he's way up there, but even as he's jumped down here, it should still be pretty nice for us. So that's good there. We do have a shock version already, you know, in our loadout, so we should be fine here. My turret should be cooled down. I'm interested to see just how quickly we can eradicate Hurley here. It's going to be pretty tough for Hurley to survive this. Obviously, we can't take out his machine gun arms, which are very powerful now that Hurley has received his community patch buff. But you can see here that a single magazine of the shock one plus a little bit of shots from the turret has taken down his entire shield bar there. And now as we're on our corrosive damage, we'll begin to wear into his health bar. And yeah, he just really doesn't stand a chance. I mean, even though his machine guns are quite powerful, he still got absolutely murdered there. And he killed our turret and started shooting at me and took me down below health gate. But because this was firing so quickly, it was taking me back above health gate, and I did not go into fight for my life. So that is a very powerful weapon at this point, one that is borderline OP on Axton. It is very, very powerful. We'll go ahead and kill the last two enemies here, but we can see that this weapon now, I mean, it's one of Axton's best options. He has a lot of good options, but this is among the best. There is nothing that this weapon is doing that leaves anything to be desired. I mean, you reload quite frequently, but not a huge deal at all. You still reload less frequently than you did before the community patch, so that's something that is very cool. Now, does it suck? No. No, not at all. And I think it's good now that you don't need a specific accessory to make this weapon viable. Prior to the community patch, you needed one accessory out of I don't know how many there are available for shotguns. I think 6 or so. And so with that in mind, you had a very low chance of like farming a decent version of this weapon with the perfect accessory and then a good grip. So with that in mind, it makes it a lot easier to farm for a viable version of this weapon. Let's go ahead and take a look at the other accessories real quick just to kind of understand what they might be boosting. I have a social and a reactive here, I think, and I would imagine that the practicable version is still going to be the best. I mean, that fire rate compared to the social is significantly higher. The damage is just a smidgen lower, and the rest of the stats are pretty much the same. I guess the social version will get 1 more shot per magazine. Now, compared to the reactive version, you can see that the reactive version does reload quicker, but it has a little bit less damage and it does have less fire rate. So I still think the practicable version is going to be the best, but it's not as if these versions are not good like they were prior to the community patch. So that's pretty cool. Now on other characters, this weapon is still going to be powerful. It's just going to be most powerful on Axton because he has ample grenade damage boost that other characters aren't going to have quite as much of. But with that in mind, on Axton, it is an absolute monster. I would imagine that it's still plenty viable on other characters just because it still has a lot of good things going for it. It has healing, it has a huge splash radius, now it has, a good fire rate, good damage. There's a lot of things going for this weapon, plus that pink skin or that purple, I don't know if that's purple or pink, it's somewhere in between. That's a pretty cool looking skin. I like this weapon. I've always kind of liked this weapon, and now this weapon is a lot better. Now on Axton, I would probably recommend using a singularity grenade rather than this longbow transfusion that I was using, because you could make use of that extremely large splash radius in combination with the singularity grenade grouping enemies up, and you could make this weapon an absolute mobbing monster. So this weapon is now absolutely one of the top tier weapons on Axton. It is monstrous. So as always, guys, thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it. If you haven't yet taken the time to subscribe, please do so. I'd appreciate that as well. Otherwise, I do hope to catch you next time. Bye, guys.